Well, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I feel like one of you because I know so many people in this group. First, I bring you greetings from Farnam Jehanian, my friend and colleague at NSF, who runs the Computer Science Directorate. He's unfortunately not able to be with us because, as it happens, he's working on a cybersecurity forum with OSTP in parallel to this event. And so we thought that I'll try and represent NSF. Now what I have done is put together a presentation, but I don't have to give all of it. because seriously, what I would like to do is to spend as much time answering your questions as possible. So I'll just do the first 4 or 5 slides, start taking questions, and if there are relevant pieces in the presentation, we can go back and pick those up. So that way, it's really a dialogue rather than me just kind of showing you a bunch of PowerPoint slides. Is it visible at the back over there? Yeah. Okay. So basically, the way we think about engineering director at NSF is we most importantly invest in fundamental research, transformative research. That's the mainstay of what we try to do in the directorate. But we also fund some educational activities, and we also fund some activities in the innovation space, all taken together in a synergistic fashion. They lead to societal benefits. So strategically, when we think about our options, our choices, we think in this framework and figuring out, okay, where should our money go so that it leads to the benefits that our community can provide to the nation and to the world. This is the org chart, really not much to say here. We're in 5 divisions, 3 disciplinary divisions, CMMI, ECCS, and CBET that cover sort of the majority of engineering departments on one of your campuses, and we have 2 cross-cuts, EEC, which is Engineering Education and Centers, and IIP, which is where all the innovation portfolio is located. Couple of really important points about this. I've got a number of openings coming up, so we are looking for a deputy. So we are looking for a deputy assistant director to work with me. Kesh Narayanan, who's done an excellent job in that position, is retiring. So the search is underway. We are also going to announce a search very soon, like within a few days, for division director for CMMI. That's my largest division by many metrics, and we are looking for a really strong leader for CMMI. So your colleagues, friends, whoever you think would be a great fit for CMMI is welcome to apply. So please encourage people. And then this one is coming up because Teresa Maldonado, who runs the EEC division from Texas A&M, she's in her 4th year as IPA. And by NSF rules, she cannot go more than 4 years. So end of this calendar year, her term is up. We'll be looking pretty soon for a division director for EEC. So just keep that in mind and suggest to your colleagues. I think this is the chart where all of you are greatly interested. It shows the trajectory of NSF budgets. So what can I really tell you? What is shown on the chart is up to FY13 is the actual dollars, which is somewhat in excess of $800 million. And then for FY14, we show you a request of about $850 million. The good news is we actually have a budget for FY14. So Congress did pass a budget for NSF, and NSF has $7+ billion budget overall for the foundation. It's a modest increase over FY13 current plan. It's not a big increase, but it's positive rather than negative. We are currently working with OMB, Office of Management and Budget, to finalize the current year plan for FY14, which is why I can't tell you much more than what I'm saying, because that submission is going to be sent within a day or two to NSF as to how we plan to implement FY14. So the short version is expect a modest increase in engineering budget for FY14. So we will do at least as much as we did last year, possibly a little more. Each division is likely to have some increase. The amount will vary from division to division and the specifics of each division. For FY15, the budget is under construction. We submitted a budget to OMB last fall. We are now in the pass-back process where they come back and tell us what they like about our submission and what they would like us to change. That whole negotiation is taking place, and we expect to submit a budget to OMB in the next week or week and a half. President Obama will announce administration budget sometime in early March. I think I heard March 4th or 5th as the date. And then the plan is that a week after President announces his budget, NSF will roll out its budget. So expect FY15 details to emerge after sort of second week of May. One overarching thing to bear in mind for FY15 is because of the 2-year deal that Congress and administration made, there is kind of some visibility as to how much money is going to be there in the federal budget for FY15. And as you know, it's a pretty flat outlook. So we aren't expecting a significant increase for FY15 because of what has already happened. However, there are some creative things being thought about and done, which you will have to just wait and see when things come out. That's what I can say about the budget. So I'll stop here and take questions on the budget before I go much further. Because after this, it's a lot of programmatic stuff that I can talk to you about. So, yes, Gary.
Could you either at least stand and project or go to the microphone?
Hi.
UC Irvine.
Hi.
Can you talk a little bit about if you go back essentially to 2009-10 time frame forward, it's essentially flat, right?
Yeah.
And so, can you talk a little bit about what that has meant? What can we not do? The number of researchers have not gone down. The number of proposals haven't gone down.
So,
but the money is not increasing.
So let me offer a few comments in response to that. Well, you picked a very nice time period to start this thinking, which is FY 9-10, which was the start of the financial crisis. So as you know, we came practically to melting down the financial system of United States and the whole world. And we are still kind of recovering from that whole because of all the actions that were taken in terms of stimulus and so forth, things have come back up to some extent. But there is really not much of a rosy picture for out-year budgets. So if you think about what we think is going to be happening in the next 5-10 years, the outlook for federal budget is not really that strong and positive. So that would be the first comment I would make. Second, the proposals and success rates are, you can see in this chart, around 18%, 17 plus 17, 18%. And that's not gone up a lot, not gone down a lot. Of course, in the stimulus, the ARRA year, the success rate was quite high. There were some years in 05 and 06 when it was actually quite low. So is there a dramatic change in success rates? No. And then I'll make one third comment, which you didn't ask for, but I'll say it. So you're very polite people, but in other audiences, I get asked, do you think budget for engineering is big enough at NSF? To which I reply that we do what Congress gives us authority to do. We are funded by the people, citizens of the United States, and Congress decides how much they want to spend on any given thing, and so we are bound by law to do what the Congress wishes us to do. However, having said that, I confidently can say that even if they doubled my budget, I can assure the taxpayer that every single penny will be spent very wisely for the benefit of American people. So that kind of shows that there is a whole bunch of proposals that are really very good ideas coming from very smart people, that can make a big difference and that we don't have the money to fund them.
But also, since 2010, NSF has made structural changes to make the number of
Yes.
awards smaller. So that's not really a,
No, I think our awards haven't become smaller. What has
not the number of awards, because there's some pre-proposal work, there's some other
yeah.
things that keep the number of proposals down.
Yes. So that has been pretty intentional on our part, and that is something I can talk to you about. I mean, because you as a group are really very, very important part of this puzzle. So let me first talk about the NSF actions that we have taken, and then let me talk about the issues, and then hear your thoughts and comments. We think that, well, first of all, in many programs, we have started this process of pre-proposals. I'll tell you the most significant one was with the ERC program. So with the ERC program, we did two things. One, this was one of the first things I did when I got to NSF. We made the pre-proposal extremely simple and small. It's like 7 pages now. So all we are looking to find is what's your idea, what is it you want to do, what's the vision. We don't need lots of details in the pre-proposal. That, I believe, reduced the burden on the community to put those proposals together. I have the numbers on ERCs in terms of number of pre-proposals, but it's like we had approximately 200 plus minus pre-proposals. We have sub-selected 18 for full proposals. We expect to fund 3. So in terms of the burden on the community to put together these monstrous proposals, as you know, I mean, it takes a lot of work to put one of these ERC proposals together. I was dean at Florida, I was chair at Michigan, so I was participating faculty in ERCs. So we have tried to reduce the burden on the community by not having a lot of people waste a lot of their time. But that goes towards what you said. The other big change we have made is single window. So in CBET and ECCS, we have gone to a single window, and that has reduced the number of proposals. We are monitoring that. In fact, at the next AdCom for Engineering Directorate, which will happen in April, we are going to have a session on the single window experiment. Our colleagues in the Bio Directorate have done an outstanding job of analyzing data on single window. So they did something very similar in their directorate, and they have extensive data that can get to very interesting questions about, what have we lost, what's happened to quality, what's happened to opportunity, and all of those types of things. So we plan to have a discussion with the advisory committee in the April meeting on the single window. So that's another thing that has been helpful. The third thing, and this is really where is more of an observation that I hear from my program directors. So what they say is, in any given panel, there are going to be a bunch of proposals that are really very, very good, take a lot of discussion, and to then kind of bucket them into highly recommended, and recommended is a lot of the panel's work. There is a number of proposals that are in the medium group, you might call them, and they are strong proposals, but they are not going to, they will get discussed some, but they're not going to get like a real hearing in terms of a long analysis and discussion. And then there is a group of proposals that are simply churning. It's the same proposal that was submitted at the last cycle, minimal change, and it's resubmitted because somehow maybe there is a thinking that this is a random process. I'll just keep trying until, until heads turns up, okay? We think this is really adding to the burden of the review, of the panelists and reviewers and the foundation and the faculty at your institutions. So we would very much encourage and love to get ideas from you as to how we can stop this kind of just routine resubmission. It's a touchy topic because whenever we bring it up, people say, well, we don't want to deny right to a faculty member to have a chance to submit their idea. I mean, of course, we want to remain very, very open. At the same time, it seems like a large waste of time and effort if people are just resubmitting and recycling the same thing without making any substantial change. On that point, I'll just make one final comment and then here. And I say this as a former dean and as a former department chair. To the extent number of submitted proposals is a performance criterion in our annual activity report, we have guaranteed this behavior. And I'll stop.
Other
Yes.
question? Daryl?
Thank you, Pramod, for being here and for responding to our questions, number one. One thing that's also happening though, like over the last 4 or 5 years, many of the colleges of engineering did not hire that many people. They go back to the bad times of the state budgets, at least for the public schools and even for some of the privates. But now there's a backlog of lots of people in the queue who are going to be these junior faculty members, and their first point of contact will be writing proposals for NSF. So I think you're going to have to also adapt to a large volume of actual faculty research proposals coming from this new junior class that will be going forward for the next couple of years. And so I think that's one of my concerns, that NSF needs to look at that, because they're typically a faculty member's first proposal, at least for the blue sky kind of ideas, will come from NSF. And I think that's something I hope your team is also looking at.
Oh, that's an outstanding point, Daryl. What has been really interesting to me is the career program. So I would have never thought of this reality when I took the job last March and got really engaged with what was going on. A lot of program directors saying that the number of career proposals that are of high quality is not large enough. Would you believe that? That there are not enough high quality career proposals? They were having a hard time meeting targets on career. In engineering. It was shocking to me. It was absolutely shocking. They said, we got a bunch of proposals, but not as many high quality as we would like. Now, maybe it is what you said, which is that maybe the hiring was down sort of at a global macro level across the country, and so maybe that's partly the explanation. And so to the extent that what you say is going to correlate with the observation we have inside the directorate, which is that the number of career proposals which are high quality is not as high as we would like, it may correct itself in that career remains our single most important commitment. We will not reduce career proposals. We will not reduce expenditures on career program. And in budget lines you might see, but these are lower bounds. So if there are enough career proposals that are high quality, we will fund them. So I think one thing I want to assure all of you, and if there are contrary indications, you need to get back to me, because it's a big organization, So we want to redouble our commitment to the career program. We certainly want to fund young faculty, encourage your junior faculty to write their best ideas under career, and we would like to fund as many of them as we possibly can.
Peter Crouch, Hawaii. There's always a significant, on your previous slide, funding piece for SBIR, STCCs, or
STTR.
But you didn't say anything about them. There's a lot of talk, clearly, about other NSF programs like ICOR. I mean, are these, do you think about these in parallel, simultaneously, or is it just an add-on?
Although Peter is my friend from many years, I didn't pay him to say this. This is the best depiction I have of how we think systematically and strategically about this space. So much of NSF is to the left-hand side of this diagram. So that's probably 80-90% of our money is going there, and that's where it should be. But then we have a whole series of programs that try to cover this valley of death. Okay? So starting with ERCs, PFI programs, Partnership for Innovation, ICOR, IUCRCs, then STTR and SBIR. So those two programs are to the rightmost, closest to industry from NSF perspective. This is still fairly risky stuff. So what NSF does in SBIR, STTR is very different from, say, what DOD would do or what DOE would do, because those are much more mission-oriented agencies. So they're looking to acquire some technology. At NSF, we are trying to spawn new things. So that's how we think about it. And all of this is under engineering. So for those of you who don't know, SBIR is a federally mandated program. It's a fixed percentage of your budget has to go into SBIR. For NSF, all of SBIR is under engineering. So we invest SBIR for the entire foundation. And most of it goes to engineering and computer science communities. So I hope that answers what you were aiming to ask me.
Other questions?
Gilda Barabino, that's the City College of New York. I have a question about NSF's strategy towards funding in the sense that you reiterated the dedication towards the career program, for example. And there's been a strategy over the years to fund through ERCs, for example, put a lot of money towards that. So what seems that being squeezed out is these unsolicited proposals by people who are more like either mid-career or further along in their careers. And the chances of that category getting funded seems slimmer and slimmer. And everyone is not in a position to be part of a center, for example. And once you leave that section of your career where you're no longer eligible for those early career opportunities, what happens? And I think in the institutions, we're seeing more and more of a group of faculty who seem to be stuck at the associate professor level, for example. And some people are even losing their laboratories. So I'm wondering about NSF's strategy in that regard.
Okay. I think that's an excellent question. And let me first give some numbers and then we can talk about the phenomena that you are concerned about. So just to put numbers in context, engineering is about $800+ million annually. Our expenditure on centers, ERCs in particular, is approximately 75 to 80 million a year. So it's about 10% of the budget. Okay. When we fund 3 new ERCs, it's because money has been freed up by 3 graduating ERCs. It isn't as if we are increasing our commitment in terms of dollars, it's just that we are able to recycle our money. In terms of the career program, approximately $55 million. So it's less than 10%. So between those two, you're talking about maybe 17, 18% of our budget. The rest of it is for peer review, for sort of, proposals from the mainstream community. Now, is this number too large or too small? I don't have a scientific answer to that. However, I can certainly say that the future of our profession does depend upon having a cohort of junior faculty that will rise up and one day become part of this group. And so to that extent, I think having a commitment to junior faculty, I think is critical. Otherwise, you will not have new people entering the profession and entering the professoriate if there is no chance of success after you take a tenure track position, as was pointed out earlier in another question. The centers program, at about 10% of the budget, I think has had huge impacts. And so I would not see really strong reason to decrease it. And if I increase it, of course, it comes at the cost of these other opportunities. So that's how we are thinking about this, but we would be happy to hear your views. I mean, is this proportion right? I just gave you all the facts. I gave you our thinking. We would be happy to hear from this community.
Pramod, if we don't have another question at this time, let me ask you from an NSF-wide standpoint, as we're thinking about going forward, are there some key initiatives that are part of your conversations and planning and things that we should also be thinking about in terms of opportunities?
Absolutely, which is the rest of my presentation actually.
Well, there you go.
It talks about, so what I can do is, you manage the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to flash some slides and just talk about them, just very, very quickly so you get a flavor for the picture. I have 2 slides that are really important I want to show you all because I think you can really help. So this is really the picture, okay? To the left-hand side are president's priorities. These are national priorities that we participate in. And then there are NSF crosscuts. I think really important to be aware of both sides of these priorities. And I can make the slides available, so you don't need to, ASEE can post them on your website, so you don't need to worry about that. Advanced manufacturing is probably the #1 priority for the president, and engineering directorate at NSF is a big player in that. And some of the things that we are doing are things like National Robotics Initiative, cyber physical systems, scalable manufacturing, digital design. this whole area, biomanufacturing is emerging as a new field. And then we certainly are looking forward to internet-enabled distributed manufacturing, personalized manufacturing, energy and materials efficient, sustainable manufacturing, and integration of services. Materials Genome Initiative is another big one. And again, we, along with mathematical and physical sciences, DMR are a big player and essentially the idea is materials by design. So you want some properties, can you do the inverse problem and figure out can you make the material with those properties? And it takes a long time as of now, and we are looking for ideas to shorten that cycle. I already mentioned biomanufacturing. I think this is emerging as a major area. We have had a few workshops in this space, and it fits in with the president's priority on advanced manufacturing. So certainly we are going to be playing here. Brain Initiative is another big one where Engineering Directorate along with Bio Directorate and Math and Physical Sciences. And we are doing a lot of work in this area, both in terms of mapping the brain, recording technologies and understanding what's going on, and then conversely using that knowledge for doing design, brain-computer interfaces and things of that nature. So this is another significant area that will continue to be of interest. Infrastructure, I think, is a very big challenge for the nation, as Hurricane Sandy reminded us not so long ago, and a storm that's coming to us in a couple of days will again show us, especially this region is really very vulnerable to power outages. So this is something that is a national priority. What we are thinking here is the infusion of information and communications technologies into the infrastructure, and smart grid is a great example of what is happening, but it's happening in transport network, it's happening in all other parts of the airline network. Everywhere you are seeing this infusion of the physical infrastructure with what you might call the cyber infrastructure. And so how do you create resilient infrastructures that can respond and come back from either man-made or natural disasters? And as a matter of fact, there is currently an opportunity on the street that we put out called Resilient Interdependent Infrastructure Processes and Systems. RIPS is under our EFRI program, and we plan to spend several $1 million in this space. Deadline is March 19th, and we are looking for cross-disciplinary teams of people, because in the infrastructure space, what is really interesting is that if you don't take into account the human behavior, the social behavior of people, you really won't get good solutions. And again, the Sandy was a great example, where people used Facebook to figure out which was the closest gas station that had gas. You cannot imagine that reality 5 or 10 years ago, but so the world has changed in ways, and we need to leverage that change in the way we design engineering solutions to these societal problems. Nano area remains very hot for us. There is a program so graphene has been one of the biggest, those of you who are materials people know much more than me about graphene, but graphene has been a huge breakthrough, and we are already asking the question, EU is going to spend $1 billion on graphene. So we are saying, okay, we don't want to duplicate what EU is going to do. So we are thinking, okay, what should we be thinking about? So there is a whole class of two-dimensional materials, and we are inviting proposals on materials properties and devices and applications, synthesis and manufacturing, and theory and modeling. This is an example where we went through the pre-proposal step. Again, we don't want to waste a lot of people's time, so we had 159 pre-proposals, and 42 full proposals have been submitted. We think we will fund maybe 8 to 9. So that should give you a success rate of about 20%, which is in line with success rate in other programs. And again, the idea is avoid wasting time. NNIN, this competition is underway. It's a big investment for us. Decision is imminent. We expect to go in front of the National Science Board very soon to make a recommendation to the board, which will allow us to make an award for the next generation NNIN. ERC competition, I already talked about it. These are the numbers on the ERCs. 188 pre-proposals, 18 full. We expect to fund 3. Career, I already talked, so let me skip career slide. This is a new way in which we are thinking about undergraduate education at the foundation, and it's a really linked program between engineering, biological sciences, geological sciences, and Education and Human Resources Directorate. So I know Joan Ferrini-Mundi, my colleague, was here earlier in the day. So we expect to do a lot of engineering education investment through the IU's framework. So be on the lookout for this, because this is going to be, already there is an ideas lab that's on the street, and we are getting inquiries from your colleagues. And the topic we picked was how do we address social inequality, because that is really the barrier to having diversity in the engineering student body. Are there new ways to think about that aspect? So this is, I expect that we will continue to invest in the education space under the IU's umbrella. I talked about this. This is an interesting thing that we have started to think about. Traditionally, engineering hasn't done a whole lot in this space, but service sector employs 85% of US workforce, and it's 80+% of the US economy. Now, it doesn't mean that manufactured goods are not important. I mean, if you look at trade deficit and tradable things, then manufactured goods are obviously very important, but that's where we spend most of our money, is in that general space. So the question we have begun to ask is, does engineering have anything to do with the services area, or are we just going to be irrelevant to 85% of the people in the country? And so we would hope that the answer is no, we are going to be relevant to rest of it. Just a couple of examples as to how this shift is happening. I mean, Xerox, of course, went into services big time a few years ago. IBM did this in the 90s. Xerox was more recent. But what struck me really as a sign of the times is Medtronic. The pacemaker company says they want to think of themselves as providing cardiovascular services, not a pacemaker. It's a complete shift in the way you want to think of it, the way they want to think about what they do. And so to me, this is, it's kind of an interesting way. You look at all manufactured goods, look at all the Apple products, they are not selling you just music or hardware, they're selling you service. And so it's happening across the board. And so we are beginning to ask the question, okay, this servitization of products is here to stay and is going to be the way value is added. And this is the way advanced economies can differentiate themselves from a pure labor-based economy. So we put out a call under our PFI portfolio on smart service systems. So these proposals are current, they just got submitted, we are reviewing them, we are hoping for some really good ideas in this to give a sense for what might be the opportunity for the engineering field. I-Core is a big priority for us. This is one area that keeps growing in terms of dollars and activity. The idea is to take a recent invention or discovery and do customer discovery. So it's a $50,000 6-month grant, and the idea is figure out if there is a market for what you created. It's one of the most successful programs we have created. We are building up the whole infrastructure with the nodes. There are 5 nodes right now, Michigan, Georgia Tech, Berkeley, Stanford. There is a node in the capital region, and then there is a node in New York. If we get funding, we want to increase that number of nodes by maybe 1 or 2 more, but that depends on money. We have a number of sites and then the teams. So this program is doing extremely well. I want to conclude my sort of picture by talking to you about broader impacts. And this is really presenting to you an idea, and then I would hope for your commentary and reactions. So as you know, one of the things that the foundation did and the National Science Board did was to split the review criterion for grant proposals into 2 independent, separate things: intellectual merit and broader impacts. Now, intellectual merit, everybody kind of understands, what's the research idea and is it a great research idea? It's the broader impacts that gets a lot of confusion and trouble, and people don't know what to do with it. I would highly recommend you take a look at this report from the National Science Board, which maybe you can't read from there, but I'll make the slides available, so it's not going to be that hard. So NSB defines broader impacts. Let me get my glasses. encompasses the potential to benefit society and contribute to achieving specific desired societal outcomes, including. And so they have a big long list, but it's not meant to be an exclusive list. These are just exemplars of what broader impact there might be beyond the specifics of the research that you are going to do. Overall, I think there is a lot of confusion about broader impacts in all communities. I think there is confusion in the sub-PI community. They don't know exactly what to do. There is confusion in the panel reviewers because they don't quite know what to do. And then the program directors are left in the position of making, guiding and helping people to meet these broader impact goals. To be perfectly blunt, I think it is really difficult to believe that a $300,000 3-year grant to a PI and a grad student can achieve broader impacts. Okay? Now, doesn't mean that NSF wants to back away from broader impacts. Absolutely not. Because Congress wants the broader impacts, the nation wants the broader impacts, the taxpayers want the broader impacts. I think there is a much better way to do this than we have done in the past. And that's what I want to offer you. Okay? Now be careful of what I offer you, but I offer you a much better way of doing broader impacts that I think can be credible. One way to characterize what's happening right now is that take any of your universities. You might have 50, 100 NSF grants at any one time. The broader impact work, if you will, in each of these is kind of a standalone piece. There is no coherence to these effects. So each the little effort, these are vectors that are not aligned necessarily. And so the sum total doesn't have a big magnitude because there is no alignment, there is no coherence. So the alternative would be a dream world, if you will, where the broader impacts in these 100 projects are somewhat better aligned. So again, I quote from the NSB report. Just as institutions play an important role in facilitating research-related activities of their investigators, often in ways that align with strategic department and institutional goals. For example, all of us spend enormous amounts of money building the greatest infrastructure, put the best instruments, $1 million nano instrument here. And so we take a very serious responsibility for building research infrastructure, providing first-rate facilities and labs. If we did the same thing for broader impacts, that is provided an institutional infrastructure for broader impacts that would align with institutional strategic goals and priorities, and then offered hooks to the proposers that, look, University of X, we want to do these 3, 4, 5 things for the stakeholder community that we have, which might be the local community, might be regional economic development, might be urban versus rural. I mean, there are so many things that one can think of for institutional priorities. Now, if you aligned the broader impact pieces of the NSF grants to line up with what you want to achieve anyway, and the faculty bought into this, and they would buy into this if their job became easier. Why would they like this? It's because I think it becomes easier for them to write their proposals. So the idea is if we can somehow align the forces on broader impacts with the forces inside the university and the stakeholder community, then I think there is a very good possibility that 100 coherent projects could actually achieve measurable broader impact in a 3, 4, 5-year time frame. Just like our strategic plans attempt to achieve specific outcomes over specified time frames. So that's what I offer you as a better way to do this. For this, you would have to buy into this. You would have to think about it, see how you might want to implement it, share it with your faculty, come up with a way to implement. We would love to hear from you. I personally would love to hear from you that, hey, we want to do it this way. So when our proposals come from our university, take into account this is the way we are envisioning broader impacts. Because I will promise you in return that I will share your plan with my program director so that when proposals come from your university, we can evaluate them in that context. So I'm going to stop here and see if you have any reactions to this.
The broader impacts piece is always met by faculty with, some are very supportive of it and others disdain it vehemently, right? And what I've seen is that that particular component is one of the very few times you can get faculty to pay attention to entities outside of their individual research. And it seems from what you're saying here, and I may be misinterpreting, is that you're putting that onus now back on the institution as opposed to being on the individual faculty member. And from an infrastructural perspective, I don't know how tenable it is to make that entity actually work that way. That's point number one. And then the second point is, what I've seen on the positive side as relates to broader impacts are actually lots of significant programs that have actually started off as small broader impact efforts by individual faculty that have then blossomed into larger efforts on the overall campus. And again, without it, many of those entities go away because there's, you know, what NSF was saying when it said broader impacts should be a part of your proposal, it was saying that it was important. And if we remove that, where do you get that notion?
Okay, so first let me be absolutely clear. I would be way beyond my authority to even talk about removing broader impacts. Okay, broader impacts is something that the foundation is committed to, the science board is committed to. It will remain an extremely important one of two equal criteria for judging proposals. There is absolutely no going away from broader impacts. Okay? This is a way that I think we can do it better. But if it doesn't work for you, I mean, this is not a requirement. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. So if you are happy with what your faculty are doing in broader impacts in their individual proposals, we are not micromanaging, you know, PI community or universities. We are simply offering an observation that the way it is going is probably not as good as it could be. And this is a way that, in fact, it could be significantly better, but it will require sort of, you know, us working as a team. The institutional leadership, deans, VP research, department chairs, faculty, and then NSF on our side. And the stakeholders. So the problems that we are trying to address are very large. Okay? I mean, think about it. We have struggled as a community to address diversity problems for at least 30 years. I mean, as long as I have been an adult and working as a professor, this has been a problem. And we really haven't, we have worked very hard. I mean, all of my colleagues I know are very serious, very sincere. But if you look at the net aggregate effect, I think it's pretty modest. And so I think there is a better way to do this. I'm offering this as an idea, but I would love to hear, you know, can you do this? I mean, would you be interested in doing this?
Dave Williams, Ohio State. I appreciate your candor on the broader impact and the comments you just made on diversity echoes a discussion we had at our lunch table that, as I see STEM education and particularly K through 12 appearing time and time again in RFPs, again over a similar extended period of time. In these days of data analytics, where are the data? Where are the measurements that show that this extraordinary effort in diversity through NSF funding, in K through 12 through NSF funding, where's any evidence that it's made one bit of difference?
I think that's a great question. And in fact, if you were to ask Joan that question, she would completely resonate with that. And I think that's going to be one of the major pieces of IU's framework is assessments. So evidence-based investments is going to be a very large piece of what we do in IUs. So I don't have the answer to your question, but it is certainly something that we think about.
I think everybody needs coffee. Other questions? Peter?
Slightly different. This sort of service economy is sort of an interesting thing, but actually I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to use it as an excuse to talk about something else. Since I hadn't actually heard that, I thought, well, gee. In terms of NSF's focus, and maybe some other organizations, tends to be inwardly focused on the sort of what we do within the US walls. Now, not totally, but now I'm also seeing that, of course, we're withdrawing the US's sort of influence militarily abroad. But clearly, just look at China in terms of soft power, how we're influencing the world elsewhere. Do you think there's a chance that NSF will think about, how do we as a nation think of ourselves projecting our technology, our engineering expertise abroad, more globally? And how we, in engineering colleges, we have lots of foreign programs all over the place, how we may put those together in terms of a coherent strategy for the US.
So I don't know if I can answer the big question you posed. Let me begin by saying that NSF is certainly very committed to open and international approach. So if you look at many of our programs, we in fact specifically ask for and support international collaborations and relationships. Just to take an example, IUCRC, which you would think is sort of quintessential American thing, now has at least 4 or 5 nodes that have international partners. ERC's Gen 3 requires international collaboration. So NSF is not going to back away from the fact that science is fundamentally an open process, and research is fundamentally an open process, certainly from NSF standpoint. So let me begin by saying that in terms of foreign students and so forth, I think it's a huge asset to the United States. I mean, it used to be, for example, like you, I came from somewhere else and I became part of American society. But many of the younger people who are now coming in increasing numbers, are going back. But I think they're ambassadors for the United States. I think they are our friends who are going to go back and take leadership positions in their society. So I think your point that this is a way to project the values of American society, I think is a very valid one. And I would hope that US universities would sort of think proactively about how do we leverage the presence of all these international students to benefit our domestic students, to give them an international flavor, and conversely, make these people our ambassadors when they progress in their own careers. And I think engineering colleges in particular, I think, can take a very big part in thinking along that line, and I would very much support that.
Questions? All right, Laura.
This is a little bit off topic, but I am curious about this. We're well aware of the controversy that occurred with the idea that political science should not be allowed to give grants if they didn't address, I think, primarily national security. I'm wondering how that was seen in the engineering directorate, and if there were any concerns that there might be similar, or if that opened a door to the kinds of considerations we don't usually expect to see in determining what should or shouldn't be funded in engineering at NSF.
Great question, and I think I can give you a very full response. Let me begin by saying that when this thing first appeared, the foundation leadership our director and all the assistant directors, we were of one mind that this was not an SBE problem, it was an NSF problem. And the position that we articulated was to say, what is worthy science or what is scientific research should be decided by the scientific community and not be decided by political interests. And so that position was supported heavily by the National Science Board, and that's what we've been pushing as a sort of strategic response, is that determination of what is worthy research, what should be supported by NSF funds, is really an NSF decision which is done through a very rigorous merit review process, which has withstood the test of time for the last 50, 60 years. So why would we abandon what's worked so well for all this time for some transitory change in some part of the political value system? So I think that was very widely supported all across the foundation and in all the directorates. That there was no dissension that this is an SBE problem and why are we bothered. It amused me when some of the examples actually that were picked by some of the representatives were actually taken from engineering. So there was a very specific, I think it was either an SBIR award we had made to something, and it was a perfectly fine award. It led to a company that actually became quite big and got bought out for a fairly sizable amount of money. But in the title, it was, I don't forget the exact, the details of why it was viewed as waste of taxpayer dollars. But it came from engineering. So I would have never thought that anybody would pick on engineering for wasting taxpayers' dollars. And especially in a case where there was actually, measurable economic benefit that you could demonstrate. So you never know when this thing stops, It could be biology tomorrow, it could be computer science, it could be engineering. Part of it is, I think, part of it is superficial. When people write their proposals and give titles, they want to attract attention. They want to distinguish themselves. So you pick kind of, titles that are not mainstream. So you try to, and sometimes that can come back and bite you because you choose a title that, so many times it's just that. You pick a title that you thought was attracting attention, but it's the wrong kind of attention.
All right, Lance, you'll be our last question.
Okay, hi, Lance Collins from Cornell. So I'm returning to the issue of broader impacts.
Okay.
And so what I could see in fact, in some sense, Cornell has even sort of quietly been doing what you suggested, namely working on sort of an approach that spans the college that people can plug into. For the issues, some issues, I think that's very reasonable. Issues like diversity, where there's in some sense a need for scale, and an individual it cannot really achieve that, and so working together. But there are many other ways in which one can have broader impacts, and I just think, so there are sort of two concerns I have. One is that it might stifle creativity, a little bit of what Greg was saying, and the second is that you still need to sort of distinguish yourself. And in a sense, how does one do that if it's sort of an institution-wide as opposed to an individual effort? Intellectual merit is, will stand on its own, but then as you were pointing out, that we actually evaluate these two separately, and then this other one, in essence, is just something that comes from the institution.
I think those are both I think, very valid points, and I would worry about both of those myself. So first of all, this is not meant to be exclusive. This is not meant to be the only way you do broader impact. This is simply one way in which some subset might want to do it. Two, this is not to detract from creativity. That is, in other words, just because you can take a little piece and fit into, that's not what we are looking for. We are looking for creativity in what you are doing and how it relates to your research, and in a way that furthers the larger institutional structure that you put. It's the same analogy as with a lab, right? Just because I use the instrument doesn't make my research worthwhile. It's the same thing. You got the infrastructure, you got the pieces, you got the strategies. Not just routine use of that would be non-creative and not very competitive. But if we offer that infrastructure and let people be creative in terms of, now, this is my research, this is how in a creative way I can further the broader impact goals, then I think you begin to see the possibilities of really high impact very creative set of possibilities that would align and cohere and, in my opinion, really have a broader impact. The truth of the matter is, and this is anecdotal, so I don't have data, but there are colleagues who are working now on data, figuring out how it is going. I think a sizable fraction is fairly routine, broader impact. So a colleague of mine calls it drive-by broader impacts. Broader impacts, oh, let me see, what's the closest middle school which has, some ethnic diversity? I'll go and, take my grad student and spend a couple of afternoons. I think this is what I'm saying is that if that's what is going on, and every time I say this, there is a lot of chuckle, which makes me think that there is some element of truth to what I say. That's what I'm saying, that, okay, to me that's highly non-creative and highly routine and has no impact. I mean, has very little impact. Let me not go overboard, but I think this offers, in my opinion, a much better way to do this. Again, non-exclusive, I mean, this is just one piece for some subset. And it would depend upon you. It would depend on whether you believe that this can have an impact. Otherwise, it won't. So this is not meant as a prescription. It is meant as an opportunity.
Pramod, thank you very much. Please.